We're going to give it a second while you all fill the Zoom screens. We have a couple pages of people. Welcome, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. I'm just giving it a second because I can see people loading.
Down.
And we're still admitting people to from the waiting room.
No, Jadzia, please don't, okay?
Could everyone, if you're not speaking, could you put yourself on mute, please? Thanks. We love everybody's input, but we'll get this going first. Myra, I assume you're still letting people in and you'll watch the waiting room so I don't have to.
Absolutely.
Excellent. All right. Well, we're about 12:01 here, so I think we can get started. Welcome, everyone. It's so good to see so many familiar faces and names, and so many new names. We have a really big crew and people still entering entering from the waiting room today for our Elevate Networks Executive Roundtable. Yeah, this crowd, obviously the topic and our speaker are bringing a huge crowd today. I'm so excited to have our conversation with Sonya Weigle today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Allie McDonald. I'm a longtime investor and owner of Elevate Network. I call myself a recovering asset management CEO or former asset management CEO. I'm a wife. I'm a mother of 10-year-old Bobby. I'm a fierce advocate for women and girls. And also, those of you that know me, I'm a running enthusiast. Although I'm not as enthusiastic in Boston these days with the temperatures that have been, below 20 degrees during my outdoor training runs. It's been a little bit difficult. But anyway, that's a little bit about me, but it is my pleasure to be your host today. And before I get into my conversation, excuse me. Apologies, I have a little bit of a runny nose. But before we get into the discussion with Sonya and our topic for today, I'd like to give a very sincere thank you to our sponsor for today, Harvard Business School Executive Education. Their programs offer world-class learning experience that energizes aspiring and established change makers. For more information about them, please visit hbs.me/elevate. And none of you have to write that down. If you're interested in looking, doing a reinvention, a pivot, and want to do some learning at Harvard Business School Executive Education, Beth Capucci, our head of enterprise sales, will be putting that link in the chat so you can link on that right there. And we're just so thankful for aligned sponsors like HBS Executive Education. They help us continue to bring high quality programming to our members and our guests. So we're so thankful for their long-term commitment and support. So before we get into the meat of today, a few housekeeping items. You all know about the chat. Many of you have been on various virtual meetings with us here at Elevate, and some of the greatest things that happen during these meetings is the conversation in the chat. So please, if you have something to add or a resource, feel free to do it in the chat. Anusha will be watching the questions, and we'll get to as many questions as we can after the conversation that Sonya and I are going to have. So feel free to be active and engage with each other in the chat during today's conversation. Sound good? All right. Now on to our topic and our speaker today, the art and act of reinvention with Sonya Weigle. Let me give you a little bit of a background on Sonya. She's a C-suite executive, a successful entrepreneur, a board member, a radio host, a former management consultant, a wife, a mother of 3 grown children, her son, Harper, and daughters, Lauren and Ashley. Actually, I think, Sonia, it was Ashley that you just dropped off in Florence for her semester abroad. As
Yeah,
Sonia, as Sonia and I are talking about reinvention and pivot, I'm like, I want my next pivot to be a college junior going to Florence for a semester.
me too.
A really great thing. Um, Sonia was an avid tennis player for years, and now she spends time, like Myra did this morning, on the Pilates reformer. And as we all know, the physical pivot and reinvention is also very real as we get on in our careers. And I think the last thing before I hand it over to Sonia is these are very divisive times. And this may seem controversial when I'm introducing someone like Sonia from Philadelphia, but what I'd like to say is go Eagles.
Go birds.
Let's go birds. Okay, so you can read Sonia's full bio on our site and check her out on LinkedIn. But as we all know, the professional bio only tells part of the story. So I'm really excited for you all to hear about Sonia's journey and her pivots and her reinventions. So Sonia, before you take us through the story and we talk about your key pivots and reinventions, I think it makes sense for you to share what you're doing right now with the audience. And this is somewhat selfish because to me, this is so interesting of where you landed. So welcome, Sonia. Tell us all about what you're doing.
Thank you, Allie. Thank you, Anusha. Thank you, Elevate. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here with all of you. I love nothing more than engaging and connecting with really strong, powerful, wonderful women. It's one of the things that I'll talk about later in terms of my reinvention is I only get to do what the things that I want to do now. And hanging out with women like you is absolutely at the top of the list. So I am currently the Chief People and Investor Relation Officer for Marinus Pharmaceuticals. We're a rare epilepsy biotech headquartered in Philadelphia. Unfortunately, we are on the other end of a trial that did not go as well as we'd expected. And so I've spent the last few months working with our amazing team to find a buyer for the company so that the drug can remain on the market for the 200 plus patients that are in need of that drug. But where I find myself now post Marinus will be I'm going to be relaunching my 21-year-old consulting practice that I had prior to Marinus, where I'm going to focus on advising the CEOs of early stage biotech companies. I have a lot of passion around early stage drug development. But I'm also launching an impact investing fund. I want to be that first money in for underrepresented founders. So for women, for people of color, for people in the LGBTQ community, those folks that are launching biologics, pharmaceuticals, med devices. This population of people, while brilliant, are often over-mentored and underfunded. So I would like to launch a fund that would allow me to be that first money in to get them to their Series A or to a point of acquisition. And I'd also like to do some coaching and some speaking where time allows. Alec, what I would say though is beyond the kind of bio piece, where I find myself most importantly to me is after what's been an 18-month journey, I now find myself in a place where I'm looking at the ability and the privilege to be able to do what I want to do, the way I want to do it, with the people I want to do it, and I can serve the people that I want to serve. And, I feel like this present moment is sort of the unforeseeable, unmanageable future that I used to think about. So that's what I'm most excited about right now.
That's great. And I think all of us would love to hear, because we'd all like to be there, right? Who doesn't want to be doing what they love with whom they love and for people that they care about? So that is so aspirational. So let's talk through how you got here. What is the journey and the pivots and the reinventions and those bits of advice that the rest of us can take from you to get there?
Sure. Yeah. The pivots, so many pivots. Get into your 50s and there'll be pivots on top of pivots if you kind of look back, right? But, as I think about the ones that were most consequential at the intersection of my personal and professional life, They're really grounded around the needs of my kids. I started life after consulting, after graduate school in global consulting, and I loved it. I was traveling 5 days a week. I was the moving up the partnership ladder. Things were great, and then I showed up pregnant with my first baby, the 26-year-old Harper, and decided I could not ever leave him, let alone be on the road 5 days a week. So the first major pivot was leaving global consulting, which I loved, and going into corporate, which was also great. And I did that for 2 years, and I found myself chasing trains, planes, and automobiles with a huge belly with baby number two, and baby number one calling the nanny mommy. And it just fell on me one day that I would look back at the pictures of these kids when they were little, once they were grown, and be filled sort of with remorse was the word that came to mind at the time, not even regret. And I felt very, very moved to come home and to raise our kids. That was a pretty significant pivot, pretty significant risk because I was the primary breadwinner. And so it wasn't just a risk for me, but for my husband, who, to his credit, just said, okay, and allowed me to make that pivot. Once I got there, I pivoted again after we ended up with our third, who's now in Florence. Because I decided I'd give birth to the brain with the baby, right? And I had these three little kids, but I also had these contacts and these connections and this career that I loved and this pedigree that I worked hard for. And so how do I turn all of that inward and benefit myself by starting my own company? And so that launched me into a 21, 22 year phase of various levels of entrepreneurship. And
So,
again,
sorry,
yeah.
before we get into that, because there's so much there, on the pivot, you talk about Hunter being born and leaving management consulting. From what you know today of where firms that are in management consulting are trying to help women from where they were back then, some of these pivots are, yes, I need to do this for me, but some of them are also, this work is not, it's somewhat forced. Can you comment on if you've seen a change in that world, and had things been different, might you have made a different decision?
Things were more then like they are now.
Yeah.
So here are the precursors that led to that. So one of the partners I was working with on a project, she had two kids who were middle school, high school age or so. She's been lifetime consultant with this global firm, and she was never home and was thinking about putting a pool into the backyard, but was also thinking about, you know what, my kids kind of need me. They're teenagers. Maybe I want to come home. She approached the family about this, and the kids were like, well, if you stop working, does that mean we don't get the pool? That was the first thing that I took notice of, and I thought, ooh, that would hurt to hear. The second thing was the only reason I revealed my pregnancy at the time was because one of the times I was off the road, I was at HQ, and the head of HR called me into her office, and she kind of pointed at my belly and said, is it a baby? Yeah, it is. She goes, that's what we thought. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to put you on the mommy track. We're going to take you off of travel. We're going to put you on a local client. We're going to take your raises down from 18% a year to 3% a year, but at least you won't have to travel. That's what we do for working moms. Didn't ask for any of that.
Right.
None of that makes any sense. Do I want to sue you? I figured I could add value and still be a mom, and that's what precipitated my launch into corporate as opposed to consulting. I know for a fact it's not that bad anymore, but that doesn't change the fundamental questions we as women and working mothers have to ask ourselves, right? And it's that seasonality thing where, women live their lives in seasons. And, my season as a traveling consultant was ending, and my season as a working mom under my terms is what I decided. And on my terms, that season was beginning.
Yeah, it assumes a lot. That mommy track reaction assumes a lot. That's because some people may choose, and that's okay. Some people may choose that they want to continue to travel, and that's their
My,
personal prerogative.
my plan was to get a good nanny and keep it moving. I had no expectation of what was going to happen when I looked at that boy for the first time. My entire reality shifted. The Matrix did this. But I never gave them the satisfaction of knowing she was absolutely right. I did not want to travel anymore. That was not the point.
Got it. Got it. So corporate and then entrepreneurship.
Right. So the entrepreneurial track was very opportunistic and, just sort of herky-jerky. And it involved everything from starting companies, scaling them, selling them. I got into commercial real estate, which I didn't know anything about. With five other partners, six other partners who were all very good and experienced at this. I spent a lot of time Googling terms during conference calls because I didn't know what they were talking about, but I was in it to learn it. I helped start a medical cannabis research company, which now has a 65,000 square foot grow process facility and 6 dispensaries here in Pennsylvania. It was never a matter of, hey, I've never done this before. It was just a matter of, you know what, this suits me and my family, what I need to do right now. And so, hey, let's give it a try. And so it was only 5 years ago when I met Marinus and they were going to be a client, that I ended up 2 years later joining them full-time as a full-time employee. And a lot of that had to do with the catalyst or pivot associated with COVID, and it just wasn't a great time to be in a job that required me to go out and to do things. And so Marinus turned out to be a tremendous gift, and it enabled me to get to the level of that C-suite that I'd aspired to and gave me some measure of stability. And then pivot again with this trial. And what was supposed to be this with the company sort of turned in the other direction, but it was a catalyst for me to say, okay, I was going to do this anyway. I guess we're doing this now. So that was the next pivot.
So if I back up just a little bit, along the journey, you got involved with some various companies, whether it be through your consultancy, but also, was there anything different that you did to prepare yourself or be open to some of these opportunities that presented themselves, right? Because you did some things that weren't core to your consultancy, and you've sat on boards that might not necessarily have been core to that. How do those things come about, and how do you prepare to open yourselves, I guess, to open yourself to that?
Well, I knew the trade-off for my commitment to earn a living away in a way that I could control my schedule and be home with my kids, particularly before the days of Zoom and, social media and all the other things that kind of help this virtual world. We didn't have any of that, right? So, I knew the trade-off for that commitment was going to have to be a very high risk tolerance and an ability to be very open to opportunities that present themselves and a willingness to just try it. So, they may not always be connected, but being very present and very open to saying, you know what, that is interesting. And the connection, the throughput for me was always the consulting. So if I was consulting, it was always life sciences. So whether it was a cannabis company or whether it was a services company that was acquiring an outsourced manufacturing facility from a pharmaceutical company, there was always sort of a pharmaceutical or life sciences consulting thread. But I was just very open to kind of where it took me. And quite frankly, when you work to eat, you hunt when you kill. Oh, is that going to pay me 10 grand a month? Let's give it a try. That's part of it too.
Sure, an important part of it.
Yeah.
So before we get into some of the practical do's and don'ts of reinvention that you and I have talked about, do you want to take us along the path of the last 18 months? Like, how did you get to this place where you are now? every time I talk to you, you're beaming with excitement about, about where you're going and the reinvention. And some of us have had reinventions that we didn't want. Some of us have gone into them with a lot of fear. But I think, you explaining how you got to where you are today in the last 18 months would be amazing to know.
Sure. So, obviously the last 18 months predates what was expected with Marinus, right? And my day job. So, my plan was to offboard from there at some point anyway. It just was, it came a little sooner. But, the 18-month journey really kicked off for me when my youngest was a sophomore at NYU. So, last year. And she and I were having really cool discussions about, well, what should I major in? And I need an internship. What should that be? And this is what I love to do. And, and just kind of talking through all of that and her excitement around it. And I thought, she's got her whole life ahead of her. What a lucky girl. And then it occurred to me, well, wait a minute. I also have my whole life ahead of me. And I have 30 additional years of lived experience to inform how I want to define what this next stage of my life is going to be. And so it kind of started with that. And then it was, well, okay, what do I want? What don't I want? And then I had to kind of become a student of myself at that point and really invest the time in myself that I had never done before, but was finally able to because, the empty nest. So I got into therapy. I did some hypnosis work, which was cool. I hired a life coach, which I'd never done before. I started a meditation practice, which was awesome. I started journaling on a regular basis. Turns out I've been journaling for 20 years. I happened to just go back through all those journals a little while ago. I've been journaling about the same things for 20 years. There's a pattern in there that I need to pay attention to. And thinking about and really growing my own spiritual gifts. And then I had to kind of launch into this wellness journey, right? To make sure to really focus on myself for the first time from that perspective. So working with a doctor, finding a doctor who would address my hormone imbalances and then working to get those balanced, right? I became a vegetarian. I have a workout regimen now that I didn't really have before. And just an overall active lifestyle. And then one really cool thing that I learned about was the regulation of your nervous system. So I really learned about not allowing external things to manage my internal energy. That was really, really cool work. And then actually investing in myself. So setting boundaries with everyone around me, including those that I love the most, my husband and my children. I got an apartment in the city, which I've always wanted. And this is my office in the city, my total sanctuary. I do share it with my family, but I did this on my own because I needed it. I upgraded my wardrobe. I got rid of all of the things that just didn't serve me anymore and invested in a few key pieces that every time I know I love it, I know it fits, I know, that was really cool. And then I began to write my own story, literally writing a book, which launched me into this whole process of rediscovery around who I am, thinking about the things I've always wanted and I didn't want, and it really gave me clarity on what that next phase should be. That's been the last 18 months.
That's great. It's funny the things you wanted and the things you didn't want, right? I think so many people think about a pivot and a reinvention of like, oh, what is it that I really, really want? And they don't start with the list of these are the things we definitely don't want and that we won't put up with. That usually is.
Yeah, I call them my non-negotiables. And I allowed myself for the first time in my life, I think, to have non-negotiables, which are
Well,
great.
right. It's good to center there. Well, I think we are. I'm seeing questions coming in fast and furious. So we want to make time to get to them. So we want to talk about the do's and don'ts, I think, Sonya.
Yeah. I have a few. I'm going to try to categorize them a bit, but do put yourselves in spaces that are aligned with your ideal pivot. Don't shy away from areas that make you uncomfortable or fearful, because success, peace, joy all of that is not found in your comfort zone. You have to extract yourself out of there and launch yourself into those spaces that look like that next phase of life that you want to live. I would say do listen to that small or sometimes loud voice that's inside you that says, hey, it's time for a change. As women, we are profoundly intuitive. We've got to trust our own tuition. However, don't do anything without a plan. So figure it out, take your time, count the costs, make the plan, but do it and then trust your intuition. Do bring the same discipline, order, and structure that you're bringing to your career and to your job. Bring that to this next experience, right? And bring that structure and that discipline to the process of curating and designing this next experience. But don't forsake your mental, emotional, and physical health and well-being in the process. Do become a student of yourself. Go back to that little girl and ask her, what is it that she wants and has always wanted, and why did she come here? Don't ignore the patterns that formed over the course of your life. Like I said, I went back and I looked at my journals over the last 20 years. And I've been saying I want this thing, the same things for the last 20 years. There's a pattern there that I, with the chaos of life, have just not availed myself of being able to see. But when you see it, it's kind of magical and it just kind of leads you to where you want to be. So don't let the chaos of life prevent you from seeing those patterns. Those are my do's and don'ts.
Those are great. And you already gave us your quote, right? I think you gave me a great quote yesterday.
Oh, yeah. This present moment used to be my unimaginable future.
Love it.
Isn't that cool?
It's so great. And we talked about this because it's such a great quote. And you can really apply it to everyone, but some people aren't in the present moment. They might not be in their best future.
Yeah. 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 But that's where you want to get. You really want to be able to say, man, I prayed for this and look at this. Here it is.
Right?
Yeah.
So those are great. And I'm so glad that we are taping this because you said those quickly. And I think there's probably a lot of people, me included, that are going to go back in and write those down. So thank you for that. We talked about 4 things that people can do right now to curate their own reinvention.
Yeah, so I, like you all, am, I'm a process person. I value my time and I like tangible takeaways. And so I was thinking about, and Allie asked me to think about, so what can we take away? So I boiled it down to, I think, 4 things that you can really begin to think of and actively do if you're looking to kind of curate your reinvention. The first one is to do the work to discover your authentic self. And you can do this by really defining your personal goals, understanding what your strengths are, where are your areas of growth, but, in the context and through the lens of where you're going, right? So what are the strengths that I have that will enable me to be successful in this space, right? What do I need to kind of clean up or fix? That time of personal discovery is really cool. It's really important. And it's really foundational to make sure that you are fully aligned with where you want to go and how you're going to get there. So that would be the first step. The second step is to identify and overcome your limiting beliefs. So people talk about that a lot, but I found that exercise to be really, really interesting. I worked really hard to try to recognize my own self-imposed limitations and then, really developing strategies to try to overcome them. That's an important second step that you can take right now. Third, I would say set intentional goals and define what success looks like to you. One of the things that Allie and I were talking about yesterday is that success is not the same for everybody, right? So, you know, and success is not always defined the same in whatever phase of life you find yourself in. So what does success for you in this next phase look like for you? Take some time to really figure out what that is so you have a true north to point to. And then lastly, I would say, you know, design a personal action plan. So you're going to develop realistic and actionable goals and a plan to achieve those goals. How are you going to pursue those goals? How are you going to create and ensure your vision for success? And what are you going to put in place that ensures that you are consistently ticking and tying back to those goals and measuring your success, right? Because it's going to be an evolution. So make sure all of that is part of the plan as well. Those would be my, four things. They're not quick, by the way, but 4 things that you guys can do to begin to curate your reinvention.
We can't get them all done by this evening.
You know what? I know most of us would try. That's how we roll. But it is interesting once you start to dig in, what it opens up for you, which is good things, and it is a good thing. It's not always good things, but anything that I have learned that anything that does bubble up that's uncomfortable is there for a reason, and it's there to be dealt with and moved out of the way so that you can keep going.
Well, that's great. There's so much here. We could talk for hours. We could have taken each one of those and had a hour-long discussion on it. And I have several questions from the audience. So before we get to those, I know that you have some resources, Sonya, that you want to share. And one of my colleagues, maybe Myra or Beth, can type the book recommendations into the chat. But I think you have some resources and recommendations for those of us that are trying to do this work.
I do. I was thinking about you guys today, and I was like, what was really helpful for me was I'm a reader, I'm a researcher, I like data. And so I was thinking about you guys today. I was like, why don't I share the 4 books that I've really dove deep into over the last 18 months? This has been my plane reads, my just my beach reads. The first one is called The 5 a.m. Club by Robin Sharma. And it's owning your morning to elevate your life. And it's a cool book because it's sort of written in fiction form, but I love a morning routine. That's been critical for me. So this was critical. The second one is called Key Person of Influence, the 5-step method to become one of the most highly valued and highly paid people in your industry. So for me, as an aspiring coach and as on these other things, that was cool. And that has been a great book. One I'm super excited about is called The Life Brief, a playbook of no regrets living. And it was written by a woman who's a PR person, and she does these briefs for her clients, and she decided to do a brief for herself and just completely reinvented her life. Really, really cool book, and actionable things to do within that book as well. And the last one could be my favorite, I don't know. You don't owe anyone. Free yourself from the weight of expectations. This one was super cool. So these are all dog-eared and written in, and my highest recommendation to all of you guys for these books.
I think the last one, whether you're doing a pivot or a reinvention or not, every woman needs that.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Completely agree.
Well, we certainly have a lot of questions, and I don't want to keep other people from personally asking their own question if they want to. I was going to start, and I apologize if I don't pronounce your name right. Isioma.
Yes, that is correct.
Would you like, I love your question. I think it's important as we're thinking about pivots for you to ask that to Sonia.
Hi, Sonia.
Hi, Yoma.
I just wanted to know which have been the most transferable skills along your journey.
I think my ability to make connection and network. I'm sort of a natural salesperson, I've come to find as well. But I think my intuition serves me really well from a consulting perspective, and that I'm really good at analyzing a situation, understanding what the core issues are from a people process technology standpoint, and then designing solutions from a consulting standpoint to get there. So, but also intuitively kind of knowing, if it's a CEO or an executive saying, this is what's happening in our organization, I'm really good at saying that's what you think is happening. That's a symptom. That's not actually the problem. And then kind of being able to dig in and find the actual problem and solution to it. That works whether I'm coaching, whether I am running HR, whether I'm, raising capital, it seems to be all of those things have been a skill set I've been able to rely on.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Sure.
Pam, are you here? Tam Williams.
Yes, I'm here. Hi. And Sonia, welcome. This has been great. My question was, with all of the changes and challenges, and there's a lot of challenges happening right now in today's workplace, off that word authenticity constantly comes up. And I'd like to know, do you believe that women can truly be their authentic selves today? And what advice would you give to us who is striving to maintain our authenticity while navigating, our career or, trying to make that next step?
What an amazing question. And authentic is one of my favorite words. I will say it's becoming harder, and in some cases, for some people, more dangerous to be their authentic selves, which is utterly heartbreaking. My experience has been the more power, impact, and influence you can have in an organization, the more you can ensure and open up spaces for the authenticity of others. So one of the early things I wanted to do when I was in grad school is I really thought I wanted to be a political candidate. I wanted to run for office pretty badly. And so I worked for a senator, and I was just on the intake desk and taking constituent calls in and out, and just sort of watching how these very concerned citizens were bringing their concerns to their senator. And I was a very concerned intake person taking down their concerns, transferring it only to see it die in the ether. And I realized that the power in politics is not necessarily in the candidate themselves, but in the business and money and everything else structure that goes around it. And so at that point, I decided my job was to get to high enough levels of power so that I can be the one in the room, as RGB says, to make the decisions, right? And so I think what we have to do in order to protect our own authenticity and to open up opportunities for others to be their authentic selves is we have to be the ones in the room who are making the decisions and making the rules. We have to be the ones to take the power and to be in power.
Thank you so much for that. Power, impact, and influence. I wrote that down, so thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Tam. Rosie, you have a few questions in the chat.
Yeah, I'm practical. You mentioned like you're a process person and practical. So a lot of my questions are around basically how you positioned yourself. Did you retool? Did you take additional certifications? Did you rebrand yourself? What kinds of organizations did you go to that opened up more doors? Like, so it's sort of the practical side of the transformation.
Which transformation?
I guess you can choose which one.
Well, so when I left corporate to start my own consultancy so that I could raise my, at the time, two babies, going into consulting, I was able to use my brand as, a former global consultant, to open those doors. When I went into, other areas of entrepreneurship, each case study, each client review, those things, and it's a lot of word of mouth, as well. I did get a coaching certification because I thought I was going to start a coaching practice back when I met Marinus. Um, but it's more about positioning myself in the spaces where I want to operate and just observing and making connections and relationships in those spaces, and finding mentors that help as well. And then a lot of it is just the natural function of business development.
And just as a follow-up, did you ever have imposter syndrome at any point? And if so, how did you overcome that?
At every point, every every step of the way. Imposter syndrome is such a uh, just a uniquely female, hurdle that we place really on ourselves. So it's important for me to have something like Elevate, really, to surround myself with other women who are operating, at that level, or higher. So you get your validation from women that you admire, women who you see are doing it. They say dress for the job you want. I say make your network for the space where you want to be, and and have authentic, honest, genuine friendships and, professional relationships where you can get the good, the bad, and the ugly, and be ready to receive it. Then I think you're really looking at things through a true lens and not just your own lens.
Thank you, Rosie. Ingrid, are you here?
I am here. Hi. Hi, everyone. This is so inspiring. Thank you so much. I'm wondering what types of questions helped you pinpoint what you wanted. So you mentioned you worked with a life coach. You've been doing a lot of self-reflection. What are some questions we can be asking ourselves?
So it really started for me when I got really excited about the idea that, at this ripe old age of 52, I could still have my life ahead of me. And, so the first question was, well, how would I look at this if through the lens of the same lens that my 20-year-old daughter is using, right? So what brings me joy? I kind of came up with four, I want peace, I want joy, I want ease, and I want flow in my life. Wherever it takes me, however this journey lands, that's my core foundational set of principles. And that's the lens through which I'm going to evaluate every opportunity or every possibility. So those are the things that I know that I want. What I don't want, that was another big question. So what are my non-negotiables, right? So I no longer want to have to sit in spaces and be with and work with folks that I don't want to have to work with anymore. I don't want to be limited on my ability to travel. And my one kid in San Francisco, one in LA, and one in New York. I don't want to be limited in my ability to go see them and engage with them if that's what I want to do. So just very practically those kinds of things. And then what am I really good at? What makes me really happy? What would cause me to just jump out of the bed every day and not see it as a slog, but see it as an opportunity? Who do I want to serve? Based on what I'm really good at, who would best benefit from what I have to bring to the table? I mean, serving others makes me supremely happy. So, how do I bring that into this next space, right? This next pivot, those kinds of things. And, and it was really important for it to be really me focused for the first time, because I've been so focused on these chicklets and my husband and this career and these jobs and everything, but, with a real authentic, true me focus. Does that help? Okay.
Thank you. That was great. Sorry, I couldn't
You're
unmute.
welcome. You're welcome.
Holly, I noticed I just let you back in.
Thank
And
you. My computer locked up on me. So, oh my gosh.
well, it's great. Now it's your turn. So
Okay, so you said something that really piqued my curiosity. There's been a lot of times in my life that you just empathize so much with your loved ones that when there's pain or family problems, I mean, sometimes it just knocks my focus and concentration just right out of me. And it does take a lot of energy to deal with that. So, Sonia, how should I deal with that in the future? I mean, is there something that I can do um, to help me stay on track?
That's an amazing question. One of the things I often say is, I'm only as happy as my saddest child. Just, it doesn't matter, whatever, the biggest work problems, the meeting with the CEO, whatever it is, it just pales in comparison to the fact that, my daughter just broke up with her boyfriend and she is so unhappy about it, or, you know, other things that are much more important than that, right? But whatever the family issues are. Um, the work that I did around regulating my nervous system was really, really cool. And that has been the tool that I use. And I would encourage you guys to all kind of really look that up and see what that is. It really is about there are 3 or 4 physical things that you can do to just kind of stop the energy where it is and redirect it. And the intent is not to allow external influences and external energies to impact you and your energy and and where you are in that situation. And it's almost kind of like just kind of waxing on and then waxing off the negatives so that you can focus again. A regulated nervous system is such a gift and a superpower. Um, they talk about doing things like, 20 minutes of really deep breathing. There's one woman that talks about, literally screaming into a pillow, going out and laying into, on the ground, grounding yourself. There are things, but it all, whatever method you choose, it comes down to that nervous system regulation. That's been the tool that I use to kind of settle myself so that all of the fears and things that seem so big and insurmountable and the things that are just kind of getting in the way of where I need to be, I'm able to kind of compartmentalize in that moment, handle what I got to handle, and then go, help my
Sure.
daughter book her flight from LA to Philly because she's so sad.
Now, do you have any books that you recommend about that, about regulating the nervous system?
Um,
I know the list of books was supposed to be in the chat, but when my computer locked up, well, there goes the chat.
yeah, you know what? I found one yesterday. And I wrote it down. I'll get it to you guys. I can't. Oh, nope, it's in my journal. That's
they
right.
are in the chat. It should come back up for you.
Okay, let me see.
And I know, Sonia, you're bringing up a new one, and this is Tamara, who's also that was the very next question we were going to ask, which is what supported you in doing nervous system regulation work. So
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you. And it's I thank you, whoever put, yeah, Jennifer, Anusha, thank you for putting the list of the 3 books up. Appreciate it.
Um, I'll find the book. I wrote it down yesterday. Now I can't find it in my notes. I will get it to you guys. I just found one yesterday.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
my apologies. Tamara, did you have another question? Because we answered yours.
I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay, great. Lauren Cohen, are you here?
Hello, yes, I'm here. Hi.
Welcome. Great question.
Okay, thank you. Well, apologies. I came in a little bit late, so I was concerned that maybe you had answered this question already. But my question was really, I think, Sonia, you speak so much about knowing yourself and knowing what you want and what you don't want. And I kind of find myself in that space. But having said that, I find it very difficult to articulate uh, to articulate what it is that I actually want and to negotiate for myself. And so my question to you is, do you have any kind of insights into the best way to, I suppose, as a woman in an organization, to ask for what you want where it is heard and lands effectively?
So are you asking in the context of your leadership role, or are you asking in the context
Right.
outside of out of work and sort of your personal,
No, I'm
personal
talking
one?
more in as a leadership in terms of advancement and yeah, taking myself to the next level.
Do you have so inside organizations for women looking to advance to the next level, I think everybody knows it's important to have mentors.
Mm.
I often encourage women to find mentors outside of their organization. So it's really an objective conversation that you can have and then apply. Um, I think that we as women sort of my dad told me this when this was my first pivot point in life, told me this when I was 4 years old. I have to do twice as hard to get half as much.
Mhm.
And that's been my sort of mantra. And unfortunately, I'm not sure that that has changed much over the years, but looking for opportunities to do more than what's asked, to identify, using your intuition to kind of identify the unmet need, um, taking opportunities to speak and have your voice heard in ways that other people aren't doing, and really finding the things about the job that you love the most, because you love them, you'll love doing them, and they'll be easy for you to do. And I don't even know how much this applies anymore in this remote world, but I always found FaceTime with leaders, FaceTime with those in the levels where you want to be, shaking hands, looking at people in the eye, and that kind of thing was always really good. That's harder to do. In this remote world, unfortunately. But, I think that, to the extent that you can do that, that's a great way to get your voice heard.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
I think the last question that's in the chat currently is Arlene. Are you here? Coming to the top of the hour, and so I see we'll get a little drop off.
Yeah, I'm here. I just wanted to know whether or not, Sonya, you've been fabulous, absolutely fabulous. I will definitely follow you and reach out. But I was wondering, are you going to publish your story? Are you going to be an author so that people can capture this and go back to it?
Well, Armin, thank you for that question. Part of this journey has been a feeling and a move within me that I feel like I do need to write this down. I hired a book coach over the summer, and we did start to talk about what I would need to do in order to write my story and to publish that book. And it was in the middle of the chaos at work and just all the uncertainty at work and other things. And she says, I feel like your story is still emerging. And so we're actually just going to pick it up again now in the next few weeks, because if I had started writing it then, like the chapters would be so different now. But I very much would like to be able to do that and to publish my story. I've been encouraged to do so, and I'm kind of leaning into the idea.
I look forward to reading it, and there's nothing wrong with having a sequel because we are, as you just told us, we are on the journey and transforming and evolving. So I look forward to being able to read this. This has been a wonderful hour with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Arlene. I really appreciate that. I really do.
Thank you, Arlene. Allison, you are the last question. If you're still here, I just saw it come through. We have 5 more minutes.
I am.
Here you
Sonia,
are.
thank you so, so much. This has been great. I love the whole talk about reinventing. And I've been sitting here for the last, 55 minutes or so thinking about reinventing, but on the other end. So a lot of the ladies on here are maybe not headed toward retirement or anything like that. And in the beginning, when people are first entering into the career force, you're reinventing yourself. You want to be valued and you want to see, you want to be seen as a person on the team, and we all do. But I'm thinking about reinventing on the other end of reinventing, that I'm going to be looking in a few years. You said you were 52. I thought, oh my God, she's still a baby, but not really. But, in my head, I'm headed in the other direction toward retirement. So my reinvention is not so much I want to be, go up the ladder and do all of this stuff. I want to be found, I want to still be valued where I am. And I want it to be highly acceptable that I'm not looking to climb the ladder. I'm not looking to be seen. I'm not looking for the grandiose things. I've done all of those things. I now need to allow other people coming up the chain to have those positions, but still value me and respect me from where, right where I am. So the reinvention kind of, to me in my head, is pivoting from I've got to be that person. I've got to be that go-to. I've got to be the project lead. I've got to be, the VP. I got to be like, I don't have to do that anymore. So my reinvention is kind of winding down as opposed to winding up, if that makes sense, and just maybe some ideas on how to do that, or then maybe you just have to come back and talk to us about it. So
I love that this is the last question, because this is really where my passion is. And that is that intersection of, okay, so, I've accomplished what I want to accomplish, in my personal life. Maybe I'm looking at an empty nest, and, what does this, if I think in quarters, so what does Q3 going into Q4 of my career look like, right? And I think this is where it gets really cool. Like, it's really fun, because you can do what you're doing, I'm sure, with your hands tied behind your back, right? So you're really, really good at it, but you still have all that mental energy, all that physical energy, all that desire to. And so that's where service, to me, this is where service and advocacy and mentorship and all of these things outside of your work environment come in. Some of it inside too, obviously, but there's so much that can be done for folks outside of your work environment. And we're certainly in an environment now where women's leadership is desperately needed, even outside of the workplace. And so I love the idea of thinking, what can I do from a service and advocacy standpoint with all of my skills and my abilities and my talents and my network? How can I apply that outside of myself? And that would be profoundly valued.
yeah, absolutely. And that's a lot of what I've been putting into. I want to create a culture in the workplace. And I think my workplace does for the most part, but just women like myself where, you know, it seems like directors and managers and all of those people always want their employees to be looking for more. Like, what can you do? How can you grow? And how can I mentor you? And how, whatever. But I wanted to be okay if that's not where, and I did with my younger manager who recently came on board. He's young and he's growing and he wants. And so I had a very honest conversation when he asked me, like, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? And he was like, very accepting of that. But I just want that to be across as acceptable as it is for new people to come in and be mentored and want to grow and all of that stuff, be equally acceptable for people who are not looking to do that at this stage in their life. And that, so for sure I filled my outside time and even inside time with philanthropic work, but just kind of trying to build a culture of where that it's okay to wind down.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think you're the stability these chaotic workplaces need, frankly.
Thank you for that.
It's so true. Well, thank you, Sonya. We cannot thank you enough. Looking at the comments and the thanks in the chat, it seems like everyone found this as interesting, informational, and as inspiring as I knew it would be in our prep conversations. We're so lucky to have you now at Elevate Network and as a friend, and we can't thank you enough for your time today. Anusha is here, everyone, our CEO, she's been commenting in the chats, and we would be remiss to not remind you all that you received an email this week, and we're on social media talking about our next Mobilize Women call to action conversation that's coming on February 11th. When we sent you all the survey, the number one interest, everyone's number one concern post-election was women's access to healthcare and body autonomy. And we are lucky on February 11th to have Alexis McGill Johnson coming, who is the president of Planned Parenthood. Very big deal. She's amazing. And so she'll be coming, and Anusha will be interviewing her. That's February 11th at 6 p.m. The link to register is in the chat. Register even if you can't come, so it'll remind us to send you the recording of that conversation. But that's something you're not going to want to miss coming up here. And don't forget to follow us on all the socials. We're getting better on Instagram, and we'll follow you back, and we'll share stuff that you all have. Okay. Thanks again, Sonya.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank
Bye.
you.